booties for black girl nerds.
Hi,
Hello.
Laqua. How are you?
It's nice to meet you. I'm doing
It's
great.
nice.
I'm doing great. A little exhausted, but doing good.
I know it's been a long day for you guys here. First and foremost, I just want to say that I'm honored to speak with you. It's a privilege to be able to see you in this role, and really Echo is everything that I've always wanted in a superhero series. And I love the character of Maya and how we go into this beautiful origin story that really sets the stage for the kind of woman that she develops and becomes. My question to you is, what is it that you think ultimately motivates Maya's anger to fight for justice the way she does in this series? Do you think it's the loss of her loved ones, or do you feel like she truly feels like there's no one who really understands who she is?
What motivates her is this pent-up rage she has inside of her. Of course, her villain uncle, being Kingpin, he taught her how to fight, and he taught her how to, be a criminal and do secretive things all in New York City. And they were so close, and they trusted each other, and they loved each other so much. And that's why she felt that connection with him. It's like, oh, this is normal. This is what people do. This is my life. But in real life, that her actions were actually terrible. And so when she goes from New York City to Oklahoma, she has a hard time a little bit opening up to her biological family. And it's hard for her to open up and get used to this new way of life and forget about her old Kingpin way of life. So that's why all this rage that's inside of her becomes complicated. So I think those are her issues.
And it's such an incredibly nuanced way of storytelling this complicated relationship between Maya and Kingpin. Maya also gets to connect with some Marvel characters who we know from popular Disney Plus TV shows in this series. Will we expect to see some more cross-pollination with her character and other Marvel favorites throughout her journey?
I feel like I keep giving this answer, but I personally would like to see a collaboration with like Spider-Man. So that would be very cool to do something like that. There are definitely some challenging parts of embodying a character like Maya because of the emotional stakes that come with it. I had, of course, no acting experience before getting Hawkeye, so working on my emotions during certain scenes was very tough. For example, there was a time that I did a scene with Kingpin, and we all know that he talks to me without using sign language. And so I signed back to him. And we in the interpreting team came up with a idea to use a buzzer, and we would put that buzzer in my shirt, and the interpreters would have control of when the buzzing happens. And so that would also alert me as to when Kingpin was done with his lines so that I knew it was my turn to save my lines. So all the emotion and having the distraction of the buzzing and the acting and everything, that was probably one of the most challenging parts, but it was really fun to bring that all to life and see Maya in this new life that she wants to live.
There's also some really great fight sequences in this series that I absolutely just, it blew my mind seeing you in those sequences. And I was really impressed by the fight choreography. Were you at all? Did you do any of your own stunts? Were you involved in a lot of those action sequences that we get to see throughout these episodes?
Yeah, I was involved in a lot of the stunts, but not all of them, of course, but I did do a lot of them. Um, Learning the choreography can be challenging, of course, because sometimes, we have to redo something last minute on the same day during set, and so we have to reshoot it, and so it kind of you got to make it work somehow. But it looked great on camera, so thankful for that.
It certainly did indeed. Well, Alaqua, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to Black Girl Nerds. It was a privilege speaking with you. I absolutely love this series. Only got to screen the first 3 episodes, so I can't wait to see how the rest of the journey goes with Maya Lopez.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
So this series is more dark, more gritty, and rather violent compared to your typical Marvel Disney Plus series. Why do you think it was important to set that kind of tone with this show?
Well, when you're telling a story about a character like Maya Lopez, who doesn't pull her punches, we thought we couldn't pull our punches either, and I think that was a little bit of a promise that came with telling a story about Maya. If you know her from the comics, she was introduced in a run of very dark and gritty Daredevil comics by David Mack and Joe Quesada. So, of course, as fans of the comics and the back end, we and Sidney Freeland too, our director, loved those comics, and we were like, we got to make sure we do this right and honor where she came from in the comics. So it was just about not holding back. I don't think that we set out to make a TVMA show or a TV, set out for a certain rating as much as we just didn't want to hold back Sydney's vision of where this could go. And then once it went there, we were definitely not going to, we had fun with it. So it was all just about us having fun going there for maybe the first time for us at Marvel Studios, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. It's a great connective thread from what we know of in the Netflix universe with the Daredevil series and all of those shows. So, good job, good creative take there.
Yeah.
Did you mentioned that, Sydney read the comic books. Did you yourself do like a deep dive into the comic books before crafting the universe for this show?
Yeah, yes. Fortunately, though, this run of comics that Maya came from is one that I actually was familiar with going in. I read them. I remember when they came out, and I would get them every week. I mean, this was a run of comics that Joe Quesada was, all over it at the time and the best. But Kevin Smith wrote on these comics, and there was a run he did in this era. Like it was a very formative era for me as a child reading these things. So I came to this with a little bit of that in my mind, as I know Sydney did too. So yes, we definitely read and reread all of Maya's comics that she's ever been in. But coming to it with that former knowledge was awesome and just a delight for me personally because I did have a personal connection to that run of comics.
That's good. I'm sure that's going to appease a lot of fans knowing that you were already a geek about the comics before signing on to do this show. So that's
Specifically
fantastic.
that era and run of Daredevil comics. Like they were so dark and messed up, and there was a lot of spiritualism involved with them. It really spoke to me as a young man, and I'm not
That's
joking.
awesome. So the showrunner knows what he's talking about when it comes
Hey,
to Maya's story here. So there's a lot of crossover between the Marvel characters and the Echo comic books, which you're familiar with, and notably like other characters in like the Daredevil universe. For example, like we see Luke Cage pop up in her universe, and in the Echo books, we see Iron Fist pop up, even Doctor Strange pops up at some point. So I know you can't confirm anything, but will we expect more crossovers happening with other Marvel characters as this series develops?
I think the hope is always that uh, we'll see those characters cross over and interact with each other in the future. I think right now we just wanted to tell a story about Maya Lopez and her family. And that, of course, includes Kingpin, which, of course, includes Daredevil. But really, at its heart, this is just a story about Maya Lopez and her family, which is mostly comprised comprised of all original characters for our television show. But that's the fun of introducing a character like Maya, and with our new Spotlight banner, also, by the way, getting to say, hey, this is a more obscure character from the comics, so here they are, and here's how we meet them. But then the hope, of course, always, as it's always been with Marvel, is that one day we get to see these characters interact with some of the larger than life characters out in the rest of the universe.
That's awesome. Well said, by the way. Uh, Very diplomatic answer. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Uh, does does it weigh on you at all, Richie? Carrying this ship of a new Marvel series, obviously it comes with a lot of responsibility. There's going to be a lot of fans out there that have expectations. I mean, do you feel the pressure of putting this show out into the world, or maybe do you not really feel that pressure because you're not necessarily stepping into anybody's shoes as far as the cinematic universe goes? I mean, yes, it's based off the comics, but you're essentially breaking new ground with this new series. So do you feel like there's less pressure there, or is there more pressure?
Uh, we have felt an intense pressure to make sure that we were telling the best story possible because Maya is a new character that is pretty obscure from the comics, right? So there was definitely a pressure of just making sure we were telling the most entertaining story for Maya. And we were very proud with where the show got, and then we got to go to Oklahoma and show the Choctaw Nation the first two episodes as soon as they were done, and seeing the reaction from that crowd of 250 people within the Choctaw Nation and seeing what it meant to them and how well received it was completely alleviated that pressure for me, because it felt like we won and we entertained the people we wanted to entertain. It was really special. So to answer your question, I did feel that pressure, knowing that, oh man, there's a new character, it could go, like, who knows. But then seeing what it meant to certain people along the way totally alleviated it.
Well, you've definitely won my heart over with this show. I mean, I've only seen the first 3 episodes. I can't wait to see more. And it was a pleasure talking to you, Richie, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to Black women.
Thank you.
How are you guys?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Chaske, I'm going to start with you. You're no stranger to the MCU, nor to working on shows with strong female leads. I wanted to know, in the case of your character, Henry, what do you find to be most valuable about his contribution to this narrative as he aids in Maya's journey?
Well, his contribution, helping Maya.
Yeah.
I think helping Maya, and also once he finds out what she wants to do, because he doesn't really want to do this. His world was going pretty good until she arrived, and then everything went chaos. And I think after their discussions about giving anything away, she's moved him for him to help her. And also, I also think that because the guilt of her father and how he brought them to New York is something that he's had to wrestle with. And I think when Maya shows up, it's also a time for him to seek forgiveness and to forgive himself.
Devery, a number of cast members have had to learn American Sign Language signing up to do this role, including yourself. Can you tell us about your experience training for that, and how has it shaped your relationship with Alaqua?
Yeah, I was not aware of any sign language before. I hadn't learned it. I was not proficient in it. I'm still learning ASL. I'm a student, and I'm continuing learning well after the project. Working with Douglas Ridloff, who is our ASL master and one of our producers on the project, was incredible. He was monumental in helping shape that. We also each took ASL classes, myself included. I think the pressure was on when it came to that. We're hearing people and we were playing hearing people, but people who had deaf loved ones in their lives who were proficient in American Sign Language. So while playing Bonnie, she was a coda, child of a deaf adult, so she was, I think, of all of the family members in Echo, probably the one who could communicate clearest with Maya. And so I wanted to make sure that that was done appropriately, that I was paying respect to deaf culture and to deaf communities, and getting to work with Alaqua, who was so incredibly patient and sweet and badass, was just awesome. She's a force. So being able to sign with her in ASL for Echo was an honor.
Chaske, back over to you. I've only seen the first 3 episodes of this show. That's all that they've allowed us to screen, unfortunately. I want to binge the rest. But I'm not quite sure of Henry's intentions.
Good.
Is he a man?
Good. I'm glad. No, that means I'm doing my job right.
Yeah, you are. I mean, is he a man that we can trust as this story progresses, or is he just not that easy to read?
I can't tell you, man. That's you're gonna have to watch it. I'm glad you said that. I'm really glad you said that, though. That's what I wanted. I don't want him to be. I want him to be very gray, and I'm glad you said that. That makes me feel pretty good.
And we'll keep it there.
Yeah.
Devery, I want to go back to a conversation that you had before. You had done an interview talking about being cast in a Marvel show and being concerned about losing weight for the role, which in this case, you didn't have to worry about that. And that's very comforting to know. I want to know, what advice do you have for plus size actors who need that boost of confidence and being proud in the body that they're in?
I think in terms of speaking to people who are plus size, people who are fat, people who have different body types, I think it's so important for each of us to not feel the pressures from Western society to fit into a certain shape. I think the onus is on decision makers and casting directors and producers to make sure that they're casting people not only of different ethnicities in terms of diversity, but also body diversity. And so I think it's hanging on to that, and for fellow actors to just kind of be proud and don't feel pressure to change your size, because if they want somebody who's a size 0, then they want a model. They don't want an actor. That, to borrow from Emma Thompson, who was really inspiring in her speech with that.
Facts on top of facts. Chaske, Devery, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to Black Girl Nerds. I really appreciate it. All the best to you, and good luck with the premiere.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm also a fan of your guys' publication, so thanks for interviewing us.
Thank you. Hi, Sydney. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
In the comics, Maya is the linchpin between Murdoch and Fisk. And as the two characters, Fisk and Murdoch, as their antagonism develops, is that character dynamic what we'll expect to see as this story pushes through?
You mean the dynamics?
Yeah, the dynamic of them being that Maya is the linchpin between Murdoch and Fisk. Are we going to see that character dynamic between the three of them develop in this series?
Oh, well, I think you're leaving out a very, very important aspect of that is Maya Lopez. This is the Maya Lopez story. And she is not in service of Wilson Fisk, and she is not in service of Daredevil. They're in service of her. So I would just make that slight correction. But then if you want to see it, you got to watch the show.
Okay, I love that. I appreciate that. That's awesome. We're finally seeing. I want to shift a little bit because I love how you mentioned that she is the focal point of this show, and representation is so important. And we're seeing more representation with indigenous filmmakers. And recently, I saw some really great films such as Fry Bread Face and Me and Fancy Dance. Do you feel like the landscape is finally shifting, or does Hollywood still have a long ways to go when it comes to specifically indigenous filmmakers making films about their stories?
Yes, I think the landscape is shifting, but at the same time, I feel like we're just getting started. I think just speaking for myself and my experience, from growing up and just seeing a Native character on a production was a huge deal, and to go from that to having entire TV series that were not only indigenous people in front of the camera, but you had indigenous voices creating the show, like I'm thinking of like Sierra Ornelas in Rutherford Falls and Sterling Harjo and Reservation Dogs, and those are just, hopefully the first of many to come.
Absolutely. Richie mentioned in our interview that you read the comics, which is very, very good to know because, we as comic book fans want to make sure that the folks that are crafting these stories and behind the scenes also know much about the material. I'm curious to know, what run of Echo did you read? And is that run going to be incorporated into this season?
Yeah, I want to say I read all of the storylines, but I think some new storylines have actually come out since we did production on this. But, I think one of the first, the introduction of character of Echo in the Daredevil series was, for myself, it was interesting because it's beautifully illustrated, and but I think looking at it from a Native American perspective, it's got these cool, like absolutely beautiful watercolor sort of illustrations and backdrops in this comic book run. But the imagery that is selected is somewhat arbitrary, And so, like, what do I mean by that? I mean, like, there's cool Native American iconography, but the images are like, for me looking at it, I say like, oh, that's ancestral Puebloan from the Southwest. That's Six Nations up from New York. Oh, that's like Inuit from maybe Alaska area. And so it was just a bunch of cool images that were sort of somewhat arbitrarily chosen. And I think in addition to that, the character is from the Blackfeet tribe in Montana, but the character is Blackfeet in name only. And so for us, it was all about trying to lean into the authenticity and of the character. So then, when she became Choctaw, we didn't want to be as broad with our approach. We wanted to actually be very specific and intentional.
Maya is such a complex and nuanced character. What aspects of Maya Lopez you want audiences to know about that go beyond just her disability?
I think for Maya Lopez, it's, it's interesting because on paper you have a character who is deaf, they're indigenous, they're an amputee. But for me, I found myself actually finding the character incredibly relatable. And so for us, it was really about trying to focus on the humanity of the character and the situation, the circumstances, because that's, by doing so, it makes the character accessible to somebody who's not from either of those experiences, and hopefully allows us to tell a more relatable story.
Absolutely. I hope we get more of these stories. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to Black Girl Nerds. I've seen the first 3 episodes and I love it already, and I can't wait to see more. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you.
Better shake your booties for Black Girl Nerds. Better shake your booties for Black Girl Nerds.